Not long ago, we decided that we were going to put out a power rankings talking about who we think is going to be number 1 through to 12 in the league based on their current performances and so on and so forth. And we posted that around and it triggered a lot of conversation, which we were really appreciative of. But one of the things that was regularly brought back to us was that it was based on nothing, really. It was based on how we feel, how we're kind of guessing scrims are going, and a lot of people quite rightly called us out on that. So what we did is we thought, all right, how about we take up the challenge and try and put together an official rating for all of the teams. Something that is objective and takes into account many different factors to show how good a team really is. The way we went about it is we took something called an ELO formula. Now this is something that has been used for years and years in chess to rank individual players based on how they perform. But what we've done is taken one that was adapted to work in the likes of collegiate basketball and world football, the proper football, not the one with the pads, took that and then molded it to fit Call of Duty. What we've done is we've taken this formula, we've adjusted it back and forth. We then ran every single game in order as listed on CODpedia for the season in order to calculate exactly how these teams moved up and down. The reason we had to do this is because we had to see whether or not there were swings in ratings for every single matchup. For example, if Toronto went into a series really strong and they then lost the game early on, that would move their rating down, which means that that rating would then affect the game differently coming into the later round. The formula itself takes into account the quality of the opponent. So if I'm the London Royal Ravens and I have 1,300 points and I'm playing against the Dallas Empire who have 1,500 points, if I lose that game, it's only a small decrease, but if I win that game, it's a massive increase because I was not expected to win. The formula takes into account the difference in the ratings and calculates that win expectancy for us. Furthermore, it takes into account the level of competition. Therefore, a win in a series in champs is worth more than a series in a home series or a major or a friendly like a launch weekend or kickoff classic. We also took into account the dominance of the victory using map swing. So if the result was a 1-map win, therefore a 3-2 series, then there would be a standard amount of points. However, if it was a 2-map swing, there would be a slight boost for the winning team, and then a 3-map win, a 3-0 victory, would be a considerable boost towards the winning team, and vice versa for the losing team. For now, we're not going to hand out the exact formula as we continue to refine it and work on it. However, this is just a brief overview of the type of things that we tried to consider when we wanted to make these ratings. I'm very glad to say that not only did it work really well, but it also showed us some really interesting storylines. The first one we're going to go into is about the big 3, so Chicago, Atlanta, and Dallas, and what it showed us about those 3 teams. With the Chicago Huntsmen, we found that they started really well, as you would expect. They did really well the launch weekend and then went on to win the London home series. But from then on, very quickly, they're in the shadow of either Atlanta or Dallas, or both, or even more at times. Following the Toronto home series, they end up actually being nearer to being 5th than they do to being 3rd in the ratings, showing just how much they really struggled through a lot of that start of the second half of the season. It really wasn't for them. They had a lot of upset results go against them, and yeah, it didn't look very good, and it was only the champs at the end of the season that managed to pull them back into that top 3 spot. Atlanta were the best team in the game, from the Los Angeles home series through to the Paris home series. Really dominant, really good results, but after that they kind of wiggled between 2nd and 3rd, at times behind Florida and at times behind Dallas, and they end up finishing in 2nd overall according to our ratings. They are a really strong team basically all the way through the season, but they never really break through. It always seems like as they're establishing dominance, as they're establishing themselves as the undisputed best, they just seem to have this upset every now and again, or this big loss that they needed to take home. That kind of matches the way that a lot of people felt about Atlanta's season last year. In the Dallas Empire then, and they started really slowly. I mean, flashback to that launch weekend, and it's no surprise to see that they really do dip down early and then continue to struggle through till basically the Chicago home series, which is when they then start to compete. Whether it's the online switch, whether it's just that they managed to start to make it work, is up for deliberation, but the statistics show us that this is when they start to really compete with the top end of teams. All the same, they're not as dominant as a lot of people would probably suggest online, spending a lot of time around 2nd and 3rd, and after the New York home series they actually dropped down into 4th before coming back strong at the end of the season. An interesting statistic about Dallas actually is that they're the only team to break the 1,500 point mark come the end of a season. Second story we're going to talk about is the Pharaoh effect. Now, a lot of people have spoken about this, but here we really can see just how much he turned this Florida team around. Florida started really slowly. I mean, after a couple of events, they were languishing in mid-table battles and found themselves in 7th, and then Pharaoh joins the day before the Los Angeles home series. They actually finished top 6 and drop into 8th, but then with a bit of practice and a bit of time, they then win 3 out of the next 4 events and surging all the way to the top of the ratings. After this, they kind of linger around the top 3 for quite some time, and they actually sat 3rd going into champs, but unfortunately the back end of the season meant that they petered out a bit and ended up finishing a little lower than that. It was a sorry end to the season, but just to show though how much of a quality talent Pharaoh really was. The third and final story that we're going to cover during this video is towards the bottom end of the table. Now, the Los Angeles Guerrillas and the Seattle Surge truly were as terrible as everyone thought. They were the only teams to be below 1100 points at the end of tournaments. They really just struggled. Los Angeles Guerrillas had a couple of moments. Seattle would always then beat Los Angeles Guerrillas, and that was basically the season highlights for both of these teams. They really were that bad. However, the interesting thing is how Paris are part of that conversation throughout the middle of the season, but at the start and the end, they actually do really well. And it's the Minnesota Rokkr, actually, who started off really well and then truly fell off through the online transition. After starting the season so strongly, it is a massive decline from them, and they end up finishing on 1,111 points, just above that 1,100 cutoff point for your bottom of the basement teams. A couple of statistics that came up, not necessarily stories, but a couple of statistics that came up whilst we were running this and looking back over the data. OpTic Gaming Los Angeles, that roster that at the start of the season everyone thought was going to be absolutely fantastic, never made it above 6th and spent most of the season between 7th and 9th in the ratings and kind of lingered very much so. They didn't really beat anyone special, and they didn't really, there was nothing really to speak about their season, and they were probably worse than a lot of us would have expected. Meanwhile, New York as well. They actually brought home a trophy at the New York home series, but this is a massive surprise looking back at things, even bigger than we probably thought at the time. If you go back over their season, they're actually really poor and just linger in relative mid-table obscurity for the majority of it, again apart from that one surprise home series. And lastly, the biggest upset throughout the entire season was Toronto Ultra's win versus Atlanta FaZe in the New York home series. Toronto Ultra only had a 19% win expectancy coming into this game and still managed to win. There was a lot of big upsets throughout the season, as there always will be in Call of Duty, but this one was the one out of all the games that was statistically the biggest throughout Modern Warfare. That's everything for me on this video. Now, these ratings that we've put together are something that we're going to hone and refine throughout the season, but I'd love to know what you think of this sort of stuff. We intend to use it going forward. If you enjoyed the content, leave a thumbs up on it, as well as leave a subscription. That would be absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much for your time, and I wish you all the best.